and welcome to US Election Watch, NDTV's special show that brings to you every turn in the world's most important election, and just 80 days, less than 80 days to go for it. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's first take a look at headlines. First up, it's an action-packed day one of the Democratic Convention as President Biden says goodbye. Meanwhile, Gaza protests also dominate day one of the convention. An emotional Joe Biden gave his farewell speech at the DNC, where he says that I gave my best to you. Biden received a 4-minute-long ovation. As Joe Biden said, he also conceded that he was too old to stay on as the president. Protesters breached barricades at the Democratic National Convention. The shadow of the Israel-Hamas war now looms over the DNC as thousands march towards the venue in protest. Donald Trump offers Tesla CEO Elon Musk a cabinet spot in his administration. Elon Musk says that he's willing to serve in the Donald Trump cabinet if it happens. And Russia protests over US journalists in Kursk region. Russia is set to probe how journalists illegally cross the border into Russia. Well, day one of the Democratic National Convention went pretty much as per expectations. President Joe Biden, who is the first president since Lyndon Johnson to not seek a re-election, was given a 4-minute-long standing ovation in what was a very tearful goodbye to active politics. Joe Biden has had a 52-year-long record of being in public life, and in a very long, emotional speech, Joe Biden passed the baton to Kamala Harris. Take a look at the highlights of President Biden's speech.
Crime will keep coming down when we put a prosecutor in the Oval Office instead of a convicted felon. Name me a country in the world that doesn't think we're the leading nation in the world. Without America, not a joke, think about it. I'm being literal. Who could lead the world other than the United States of America? Well, guess what? America's winning, and the world's better off for it. America's more prosperous, and Americans are safer today than we're under Donald Trump. Trump continues to lie about crime in America, like everything else. And Donald Trump is going to find out the power of women in 2024. When he talks about America being a failing nation, he says we're losing. He's the loser. He's dead wrong. There's no commander-in-chief should ever bow down to a dictator the way Trump bows down to Putin. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. I've got 5 months left in my presidency. I've got a lot to do. I love my country more, and we need to preserve our democracy. In 2024, we need you to vote. We need you to keep the Senate. We need you to win back the House of Representatives. And above all, we need you to beat Donald Trump. And elect Kamala and Tim, President and Vice President of the United States of America.
While it was Joe Biden who dominated day one of the DNC, the lineup of speakers, in fact, included former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the First Lady also spoke about the decision that Joe Biden made as he made way for Harris even after winning the primaries and pretty much securing the nomination. First up, listening to some of the other speakers apart from Joe Biden at the DNC, and then we talk more about what really was the key talking points of day one. But first up, the other speakers apart from Joe Biden.
I serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more.
While Joe Biden received a rousing welcome on day one of the Democratic National Convention, there were others that made a mark as well. Young New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez blasted former President Donald Trump by saying that he would sell this country for $1.
The truth is, Don, you cannot love this country if you only fight for the wealthy and big business. We will have to pour every ounce, every minute, every moment into making history on November 5th. But we cannot send Kamala and Tim to the White House alone. Together, we must also elect strong Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate so that we can deliver on an ambitious agenda for the people.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and 2016 presidential nominee hailed Kamala Harris for breaking the glass ceiling.
I wish my mother and Kamala's mother could see us. They would say, keep going. So, with faith in each other and joy in our hearts, let's send Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to the White House.
First Lady Jill Biden said that Kamala Harris was inspiring a new generation, but warned that Democrats can't afford to lose.
It's going to take all of us, and we can't afford to lose. With faith in each other, hope for a brighter future, and love for our country, we will fight and we will win together. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, those were some of the other speakers apart from Joe Biden. But first up, let's put out some of those graphics that tell our viewers what really were the key takeaways from day one. What were the big issues that were discussed? First up, of course, Harris made a surprise appearance at DNC. She wasn't scheduled to be there, but she did because, of course, frankly, it was Biden passing the baton to her. There was the emotional farewell speech of Biden that I spoke about. And also, this was day one also saw some of the women politicians coming to the fore, talking about abortion. Remember, abortion is a major theme for Democrats, and that's the big overarching issue under which this election is really being fought from the Democrats' side. Now, moving on, as far as day two is concerned, it's set to be a power-packed lineup for day two as well of the convention, with former President Barack Obama set to be the key speaker. Obama, who demitted the office almost 8 years back, still remains one of the most popular, maybe the most popular figure in the Democrat Party, and is said to have even played a major role in ensuring that Joe Biden bowed out of the presidential race, making way for Kamala Harris. Let's get in Voice of America reporter joining us for more on this to tell us what can we expect on day two of this TNC convention. Kane joins us for more of that. Kane, fill us in. What is day two looking like, as power-packed as day one?
So obviously, you mentioned that former President Barack Obama is going to speak tonight. This is a moment for him because 20 years ago in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention, that was when he was elevated into national prominence here in the United States. At that time, then State Senator Barack Obama was running for a U.S. Senate seat in Illinois. He was a rising star, and his speech at the Democratic National Convention in 2004 elevated him to national prominence, and it really is considered the thing that launched him into the presidency. It made him known, it gave him a voice, and so this being the 20th anniversary of that moment, he is obviously going to mark then and now, and also provide the bridge to Kamala Harris. This is the moment for him to sort of speak to these delegates, energize them, and provide the full weight of his support into that. Another notable person that will be speaking today, former Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He'll be speaking at the Democratic National Convention to Democrats. He, of course, being one of the congressmen that voted to impeach President Donald Trump after the January 6th Capitol violence. And so his moment here, he is no longer a congressman in Illinois. His district was redistricted, and so he did not run for re-election. And so he is now going to speak to the Democrats here as a critic of Donald Trump. Something to also keep in mind, and something that we should probably point out here, is that the entire lineup during this week for the Democrats includes 3 first ladies, 3 former presidents, a host of former government officials, senators. It's a very, very diverse and very powerhouse lineup. It's notable to compare and contrast that to the Republican convention. You didn't have former President George Bush appear or speak at the Republican convention. You didn't have many former government officials, cabinet secretaries speaking at the Republican convention. There is definitely a dramatic difference in the tone and lineup of these 2 events here. And the Democrats, because they had been in power during the Obama administration and then the Biden administration, they have this wealth and this well to draw from in order to have these speakers energizing these delegates here.
Ken, I was coming to just that it's a show of unity as far as the Democratic Convention is concerned. The who's who is there. And though, of course, the Obamas took some time in endorsing Kamala Harris, so what can we expect from the speech of Barack Obama? And also talk to us about the specific theme for day 2, which is bold vision for America's future. Any specific messaging for this theme?
Obviously, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they have to basically speak to the American people through the delegates that they're trying to reach here at this convention. Because this is all on television and it's in primetime programming, and all of this will be used in sound bites, just a lot of like what you used at the top of the program here. This is the opportunity to express their policy positions and their messaging. Obviously, the things that they have to touch on, of course, is the war in Gaza. It's a topic that isn't necessarily rising to the top of everybody's speeches that they're giving here, but this will have to be addressed. But the important thing for the American voter that's going to wind up casting their ballot later this fall is how they're going to address the things that Americans are concerned about. That's the economy. That's the strength of democracy. Inflation's been very high here in the United States for several years under President Biden, and it's now easing back. And so groceries, day-to-day expenses are expensive for most Americans. And so in order to drive them into the White House, the messaging here needs to reach those Americans that have those kitchen table issues as their primary concern on how they're going to cast a ballot. And so what people here want to hear, and what these delegates want to hear, what the American voter wants to hear, is what are the policies that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have that's going to make their life better.
At the end of the day, that is what it really boils down to. Every election in every part of the world. Kate Faribault, thanks so much for speaking to me on this very special show, US Election Watch. In fact, let's get in our first guest on the show, which is an important Ranjeev Puri joining us, an important voice. He's a Michigan State Representative. Mr. Puri, is my voice reaching you, sir? And thank you so much for speaking to me.
It is, yeah. Thank you for having me.
So my first question to you is, as day 2 of the DNC is set to kickstart, what about the specific issues as far as this election is concerned? You heard the Voice of America reporter also saying that it boils down to for every election, the electorate wants to know what is in it for me? How does this impact my life, changes my life? So from that point of view, what do you think this election is going to come down to?
Yeah, I think the difference is very clear and stark. I think you have a campaign with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz that's laying out a vision that will improve the lives of everyday Americans. I think, coming from Michigan, one of the key battleground states, we are on the ground every day, hearing and listening to voters and understanding what is on people's mind. What are those kitchen table issues? And like was mentioned, obviously inflation is rampant, and the vice president has an economic plan to help bring down inflation, help reduce healthcare costs, make sure that we are continuing to fund public education, obviously making sure that the right for reproductive choice is top of mind. And when you contrast that to the vision, or maybe lack thereof, from former President Trump and a potential second term, which is kind of been outlaid in this Project 2025 that we're calling it, is very stark. That is riddled in divisiveness, in pitting communities against communities, talking about mass deportations, and really would be a step backwards. So I think that the differences are very stark.
Right. And Ranjeev Puri, as far as the DNC itself is concerned, there are now heavyweights that are lined up over the next 2 to 3 days. How do you see the convention as a contrast to the Republican convention that happened last month? Essentially, everybody is pretty much solidly behind Kamala Harris and her nomination.
That's right. And I think that is the kind of the difference between the two conventions we're seeing. The RNC was about a month ago, not too far from here in Chicago. But when we kind of compare that to what's happening this week, the Dems are very united here. There is a tremendous amount of energy throughout the entire city of Chicago. Everyone's very excited, as was highlighted, even judging from the speaker lineup. Every single day, from Monday through Thursday, we have key, very, very key ranking members of our party speaking very proudly and enthusiastically to get behind Vice President Harris, to nominate Vice President Harris and Governor Walz to be our candidates on the ballot this November. And when you compare that to the RNC, former presidents, former first ladies, a number of key stakeholders on that side did not show up to the convention, nor did they speak. And so I think, again, the difference is very stark with what's happening at this convention, and as we kind of prepare to get into battleground mode in November.
Right. There are two questions I want to ask you. One is about the caucuses, the specific messaging for each of the caucuses. And second, of course, is the state that you're representing, which itself is a swing state. What do you think could work in the Democrats' favor?
So Michigan is trending blue. I think there's a lot of excitement with Vice President Harris now being the presumptive nominee to be carrying us forward to November. We are starting to see that coalition from 2008 getting excited again. Volunteers are asking to door knock and make phone calls and talk to their friends. Things are very exciting in Michigan. If we talk about polling, the same polling that showed a very close race, or maybe even Trump leading a month ago, now has switched kind of in full form, has Kamala Harris rising above in the polling. We are very excited with the work that's happening in Michigan and the infrastructure that's been built in Michigan to make sure that our voters are coming out. I'm obviously biased, but I think Michigan is probably the most important state in the country this election. There's 15 electoral votes. There's hardly any path to winning the presidency without winning Michigan this year.
Right. And as far as your task is also cut out, talk to us about what would you and, of course, the Democrats in some of these swing states be really focused on in terms of messaging?
Well, like I said, it's really about what can you do for me, right? As you mentioned earlier, and a lot of voters want to know how their
but inflation is an issue that Donald Trump's campaign talks about many times. They've picked on inflation specifically. How will the Kamala campaign or Harris campaign respond to that?
So they just put out the campaign just put out a plan to tackle economic issues. The first is kind of going after artificial price gouging that's happening. We are seeing businesses inflate prices just to increase their profits. Now we have a plan to tackle that very directly. And so the key here is to obviously bring down inflation while continuing to invest in our communities to make sure that everyone here can reach their potential. As was mentioned in President Biden's speech last year, America is the greatest country in the world, and people want to live and move here to work for that American dream, for that social mobility. And so it's restoring the ability for people to reach their potential in this great country.
All right, Ranjeev Puri, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV. We're going to keep coming back to you as we cover this election in great detail, never losing sight of why it matters to India and Indian audiences. Thanks so much for speaking to me today. In fact, let's get in another important and a very prominent voice from America, another Indian American voice, Shekar Narasimhan, who's the chairman of AAPI Victory Fund. In fact, he's the chairman and founder of the AAPI Victory Fund, one of the first super PACs exclusively focused on building the political power of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Narasimhan was appointed by President Obama as a commissioner on the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Thanks so much, Mr. Narasimhan, for speaking to me. And I essentially laid out why is it that what you're going to speak is going to be so significant for the diaspora, for the Indian American audience as well. Tell us, in your opinion, what really are the key issues on which Democrats are essentially fighting Republicans?
So first of all, look, let's face it, this is going to be a very close race. We may ask, why is it going to be a close race? It's because the country and the electorate is very polarized. Literally, a Republican running for president is going to get 45% of the vote, and a Democrat running for president is going to get 45% of the vote. So that means that you are fighting for the voters' margin. You are fighting for the voters who are either less likely to vote, they're called low propensity. They haven't voted in the last election, perhaps in 22 at the midterms, or voters that are brand new.
Okay. So yes, there are the fence sitters, and which way the fence sitters go could essentially decide which way the election would go. But tell us, where does the Indian American community stand? It's an important community, has huge contribution to the society in terms of whether it's in education, taxes, income, so on and so forth. Tell us, what is it that the Indian American community thinks about this election?
They need to understand the process of voting, registering to vote, and then actually going and casting your ballot, whether it is early or on the day of November 5th. And they need to be persuaded. Why should they vote for Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump? What are the issues? So there's a lot of work to be done yet, is I guess my main point. Nothing is to be taken for granted, and no vote should be ignored.
Well, that sounds like every election, doesn't it? That no vote can ever be taken for granted, and you've got to fight for every vote. But talk to us about the vibe at the DNC. Some of the images and videos that are coming in do indicate that there is a sense of euphoria and there's a sense of jubilation in the Democrat Party, which was missing probably till last month.
So I'm glad you're asking me. I'm sitting in a hotel room in the middle of the Democratic National Committee convention perimeter. I have been in McCormick Place this morning at some very raucous and crowded caucus meetings. Since 2008, at the convention in Denver that nominated Barack Obama, I haven't seen energy like this, both on the streets, in the buses, in the halls.
All right, Mr. Narasimhan, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV to give us a sense of where this election is right now, and more importantly, where the Indian American community is as far as this election is concerned. Thanks so much for taking out the time. And while we keep a very close watch on what's happening at DNC, let's also give a quick update on Kamala Harris's rival, that is Donald Trump, who's the Republican presidential candidate. He's also in the news. Trump asked his billionaire buddy Elon Musk to join his government if at all he manages to win the election, an offer that Musk readily accepted. Well, Trump's campaign, which is focused on the battleground states, that's where he is right now, is now also adjusting to hitting out Kamala Harris primarily on the economy and particularly on the rising prices and rising inflation. That's what the whole campaign has been about. Meanwhile, US intelligence has confirmed that it was Iran that was behind the recent hack into Donald Trump's campaign. Remember, when he started his 2-hour-long chat with his billionaire buddy Elon Musk, there were technical glitches. There is now confirmation that it was due to some meddling or election meddling by Iran. All right, on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of US Election Watch. We come back tomorrow with lots more. Stay with us. But thanks so much for watching this edition.